This is Dateline News and Conversation. Well, you can see by the hat I'm wearing, CCCP. In Russian, that's SSSR or USSR. It's very stylish now in Russia since Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was photographed wearing a sweater with large letters CCCP. Actually, I bought this ball cap back in 2016 on my first trip to Russia, and I even wore it going through customs and immigration, returning to the USA. No questions asked. They probably had no idea what it was. Now, there are a few things I want to talk to you about tonight. Some things that have me very concerned about what's happening in the United States and around the world. I'm also going to comment on some very positive things that I have been experiencing here in Russia. First of all, what Donald Trump is doing, sending troops into American cities like Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, and Chicago, and threatening to send them into other places like Philadelphia, Boston, and other blue states. He's basically declared war on the American people. And this is extremely, extremely concerning for me and for millions of others in the United States who understand that it is against the Constitution and the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the president from using the United States military in the United States against American citizens. This has caused outrage across the country. It has also incited violence in Portland, Los Angeles, and Chicago. And there are several lawsuits suing President Trump and trying to prevent him from allowing this to happen. What I think is coming, previews of coming attraction, is very soon Trump will declare martial law because he realizes that the United States is very seriously and deeply divided, and violence can be seen everywhere, from school shootings, mass shootings, and most recently, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which Trump and others have tried to sanctify him, make him a saint, a cult personality. None of this is any good. Another point that has got me very, very much concerned, actually very much upset, was Trump and Pete Hegseth's unbelievable dressing down of 800 command officers whom they summoned on short notice to Quantico, Virginia, the Marine headquarters. And basically, he ridiculed them for being fat and lazy and basically kissing butt to get to these top positions. Hegseth and Trump reiterated in their incredibly, ugly presentations to the command staff. They declared that the United States military was the most lethal and violent military in the world, who will be redesigned to kill without observing rules of engagement. This is like what happened during the Obama and the Bush years. Extrajudicial assassinations in Afghanistan and in the Middle East. On the one hand, he dressed them down. He told them that they basically were not ready for combat. in today's world. He basically told them that women officers and women in combat positions such as pilots and other positions on the front lines of not meeting male performance standards. What an insult to the troops. It was really hard to believe. And yet, on the one hand, they both accused them of being fat and lazy. And then on the other hand, the most lethal, powerful military the world has ever known. And Trump repeated this insanity in front of the whole world during his address to the United Nations General Assembly 2 weeks ago. And regarding what Trump has just done, well, recently, he has sent the United States military into, as I mentioned, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Portland, Oregon. And the question that has to be raised is what is on the minds of these generals who follow his orders, and what is on the minds of the troops, these frontline guys, also in the National Guard and Reserve? What is on their minds in terms of how they interpret their oath that they've taken to defend the Constitution from enemies without and from within, and not to obey Trump or any other person? They all know what the Posse Comitatus Act is, that their use in the United States to attack American citizens is unconstitutional. Both of my sons, now out of the United States Army, said they would even go, if ordered by Trump, without pay. Well, this is deeply disturbing to me. Now, I'm also wondering, after the generals heard this dress down in Quantico, Virginia, by Trump and Hegseth, are there any Smedley butlers among those 800 generals and admirals? Are there not just a few who will refuse his orders to send troops into American cities and to commit violence against peaceful American protesters? Are there not a few who might be considering to stage a coup to replace this maniac in the White House? I really hope there are some who will refuse and who will plan to save this country from a fascist dictator like Donald Trump and those absolutely insane neocons with whom he surrounded himself with. Now, changing gears just a little bit, as I see the situation in the United States from here in Russia, after living here for 6 years, almost 6 years now, what I see is massive censorship everywhere, including the Pentagon. Now, Pete Hegseth has issued a decree to journalists that they are not free to publish anything without his approval. Now, you talk about censorship. We've rarely seen this type of thing in the Pentagon. In fact, during the Vietnam War, journalists were free to go wherever they want and cover anything they want and report it live every night on national news and television networks across the country. We all witnessed that. After Vietnam, well, censorship of a certain kind was implemented. Journalists were only allowed to be quote unquote, embedded with certain troops and could only see and witness what the Pentagon decided they could see and report on. Now, as I look at the economic, political, social, and moral and civil collapse in the United States, I'm deeply disturbed. I do not recognize the country of my birth at all. There's violence everywhere. Trump's angry, belligerent rhetoric is inciting violence and even civil war. I think the country is already deeply in a civil war. They just haven't been shooting each other yet. But given the belligerent, angry, hostile rhetoric coming from Trump, even members of Congress, about killing their opponents, this is deeply, deeply disturbing. And then as I look and read the reports coming from the European Union, from their unelected, and I repeat, their unelected leadership, they're all preparing their citizens for war. And judging by their angry and hateful rhetoric about Russia, I think it's almost a certainty. The United States Army has had a slogan, a mantra. It goes like this: Si vis pacem, para bellum. That's Latin, and translated means, if you want peace, prepare for war. Well, I think it's more appropriately changed to si vis bellum, para bellum. Again, translated from the Latin, if you want war, prepare for war. And I think that is exactly what's happening across Europe and across the United States. Russia is not an aggressor. Russia has never attacked any country outside of his borders. In fact, Russia will not and cannot attack Europe. It does not have the capability economically or militarily to do that. And yet, the United States and the EU continue to fund Ukraine and to strategically defeat Russia. That's their goal. Everyone knows this is a reality and a direct war of the United States against Russia. Now, in the context of this increasingly belligerent and hostile rhetoric coming from both sides, really, I think nuclear war is closer now than ever. The Europeans are concerned about this. They want the United States to provide more nuclear weapons in several other countries. The rhetoric has been, well, if the EU, if the United States uses Tomahawk missiles, for example, or other missiles to attack deep inside Russia, that Russia will respond. And President Putin has said, as well as the former President Dmitry Medvedev, if attacked, Russia will use everything in its arsenal. And that includes hypersonic missiles, which the United States has no ability to detect or to shoot down. This is very frightening. This is where we are today across the world. And what humanity needs to thank is President Putin for exercising extreme caution and patience in not being provoked into responding to the ever increasing escalations and attacks inside Russia. Humanity owes Putin a tremendous debt of gratitude because we're all still alive. And now I want to shift gears and talk about some more positive things and observations that I have had from my time in Russia, and especially my 5.5 years here in Yalta. Now, in spite of being attacked here on a daily basis by drones and missiles, and the threats by people like Ben Wallace, the former defense minister of the UK, I quote, to choke Crimea to death and to invade and kill everyone and to blow up the bridge at Kerch. Now, in spite of this, life here is calm and peaceful. There are no air raid alerts. There are no cancellations of events and meetings. In fact, I'll be speaking on Thursday at a large university-sponsored event in Simferopol. I'll be speaking about war journalism with a number of scholars, experts, and journalists. Now, I want to address a couple of things: the economy and the state of the Russian military. Trump has stated recently that the Russian economy is in desperate shape, and these comments by Trump and others in his administration are poppycock. They're absolutely false and could be nothing further than the truth. And that goes for his statement that Russia is a paper tiger. Well, the fact is that Russia is stronger than ever, and it is the only battle-tested army in the world with weapons of all kinds that are far superior to anything that the United States and NATO possess. In terms of the Russian economy is strong and is now ranked the fourth largest by purchasing power in the entire world. It just moved ahead of Japan. Inflation here is relatively low. The shelves in the grocery stores are full and being restocked daily, even hourly. And the farmers' markets are flush with fresh fruit, vegetables, meat, poultry, eggs, everything. Unemployment is at 2%. Construction is booming everywhere. I've noticed this in the last, 9 years since I've been coming here, since 2016, and it has only increased. Construction of buildings, highways, infrastructure has been going on at warp speed for the last 9 years. And there's nothing I need here that I cannot find, whether it's clothing, shoes, shaving accessories, you name it. Everything is here, available, and relatively inexpensive compared to prices in the United States. And these are all quality goods. Healthcare here is free with temporary and permanent residency, which I now have. I received my permanent residency this past summer, and if anything should happen to me in terms of a medical emergency, it's all covered for free. Now, Yalta, anywhere in Crimea, in fact, anywhere in Russia, it is safe and free of crime everywhere. Young children go to and from school on foot or by public transportation, unaccompanied. When they travel by public transportation, they all have their own little debit cards that they use to automatically pay the fare on these buses. One can find kids out playing all over town without supervision. Sports are available to all children who are interested after school. And certain sports, like basketball and soccer, are available to all during daily PE in school. Now I want to talk about public transportation. It only costs 30 rubles. Now that's about 36 cents in American currency to go anywhere across town. But I have to admit that buses on my route are few and packed. It's one of the busiest routes in all of Yalta. And at times I have to wait for 2 or 3 buses so that I can squeeze in. Otherwise, these buses are new and they run regularly. There are too many autos here in Yalta, but I've been amazed that all drivers are polite, including taxis, of which there are hundreds. You can see people stopping, slowing down, and allowing trucks, buses, and other cars to enter traffic. It happens every day, and it happens all the time without exception. Now, what's the cost of taxi ride? Well, off season in town, it will be between the equivalent of $2 and $3.50 to go anywhere in town. And these taxis are all mostly brand new. The exception is individual people who drive their own cars to make a few extra dollars. They're all connected to central dispatch places that are fast and efficient. And you don't have to wait very long to get a taxi to go almost anywhere. And in terms of taking a taxi out of town, for example, from Yalta to Simferopol or Sevastopol, it will cost somewhere around 2,000 rubles. That's the equivalent of about 20 or 25 US dollars. That's incredibly inexpensive, in my opinion. Now, believe this or not, people here in Russia, including expats like myself, we have more freedoms than anywhere in the United States, or anywhere else in Europe for that matter. We're free to travel anywhere we wish, within the country and without, although today, because of the sanctions and the Russophobia that is rampant all across Europe and the United States, it is sometimes very expensive and very difficult and time-consuming to travel. Now, there's freedom of speech that does not incite bigotry, violence, or hatred of others. Speech that is false or misleading about the special military operation in Ukraine is not allowed. After all, Russia is at war. Now, Russians are not known for protests like in America. They won't pour out into the streets when they're not happy with certain things. And Russians basically don't get too upset until things get really bad. And then, well, they've known revolutions in their history in the recent past. Now, finally, there is absolutely no political chaos anywhere in Russia. Putin is often accused of being a dictator and an authoritarian. That is so far from the truth. It's unbelievable. You have to live here to see it and experience it. He was elected with over 90% of the total vote last year when he again ran for president. almost unopposed, because candidates that want to run against Putin, either they're not very well known or they have less than 1 or 2% of the support of the Russian people. And what Putin has to deal with is a balancing act between really two sides, two opposite poles. There are many intellectuals and many oligarchs that are Western leaning capitalist. On the other side, Putin has to deal with another group of oligarchs and intellectuals like himself who are passionate Russian citizens, who are patriotic Russians. And Putin has had to balance this. A longtime person from actually Ireland, he's a political and economic consultant here for the last 20 some years. He told me in a group that was visiting here from the United States that if Putin ever loses public support, he's finished. Now, does that sound like a dictator? Well, it doesn't to me. In fact, Putin's favorability rating has hovered in the 80th percentile throughout the special military operation in Ukraine. This is how the Russian people feel about their president. In fact, Russia is a unified, peaceful nation. Well, this is just my off the top of my head reflections on how I perceive life in Russia.